Good evening. This is Professor Amina Al-Din, and I have the honor of having with me Dr. Ahmad Bastani. And I invited Dr. Bastani to the show because we're all COVID crazy. He was born in Iran and moved to the U.S. during grammar school, raised in uptown neighborhood of Chicago. He graduated from Rush Medical College and NWU St. Joseph Hospital Family Medicine Program, where I met him. His career has been extensive in academic medicine at the residency for 28 years, and he's been in private family medicine practice as a hospitalist, different term for me, uh, at St. Joseph's. He is on the planning committee for the first Parliament of the World Religions, which shows the extent of his non-medical interest, kinda, and is founding board member of Health for Humanity. He's a member of Chicago Council of Religious Leaders and a medical doctor of AIDS Alternative Health Partners, and has done extensive work, medical work, in developing countries. And interestingly, we include the inner city of Chicago, and that is a developing country. Appalachia, Guyana, and South Africa, and the Honduras. Welcome, Dr. Bastani.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
And I know you're dead tired, so I
Oh no,
know I'm prevailing on you, but there's so much I want to talk about. And let me go in an opposite order of what we talked about earlier. How are the docs doing? You all have had been under enormous pressure, had to change your offices all around.
oh, I think it's different stressors for different occupations, different doctors, different types of doctors. Some doctors have seen their practices completely um, close to shut down because they weren't able to kind of
So,
transition taking care of people. Others are stressed because they're in the hospital and they're constantly dealing with the clinical aspect of it, although not as much in recent weeks. And others are like me, who are kind of solo and in private practice and just try to transition with the changes that have been quite
but
stressful.
what does that mean, transition? What kind of
Well, you
transition?
have to. So when everything hit back in March, we had to look at our operations and see how we're going. You have to take care of your patients. They have chronic issues. They need to be seen. They need to be talked to. They need to be evaluated. So just because there's social distancing, you can't, really apply that to your own office. So you have to make a change. So what we did was to transition mostly to video and telemedicine, and really, really decreasing the amount of patients that are physically in the office. And
In the
when they are in
office?
the office for a few minutes, just to get blood work, vaccines, we do everything else on tele as much as we can. So I think the stressors have been quite different in different, in
Well,
different
you know,
practice.
in your practice, how, because you got patients with high blood pressure, diabetes, congestive heart failure, the asthmatics like myself, you've got all of us, and then you got the patients where you have to think about, is this an early case of COVID?
Exactly. Yeah. So you have to kind of you have to juggle things at the same time. So what we have done in our office is to just be very, very stingy about letting people walk in. So we only let people that are quite sick or really need to be seen come physically to the office. Otherwise, I have to approve everyone that comes in. No one can just make an appointment. So it's worked out quite well. It's, we keep
Yeah.
people away from each other, clean up between each patient. And that kind of a model allows us to have time, to go between patients and clean up the whole office real quickly and then get ready for the next.
So when because this is I think fascinating people. We've had such poor medical communication. I'm gonna ask you to talk about that. I mean, I've never seen so. I don't know where they were getting these doctors from. They must have been in closets. But anyway, they're bringing all these docs and on the screen CNN, MSNBC,
Oh,
and giving contradictory messages. What is what are we supposed to do?
it depends on what are we supposed to do about what aspect of it. I think the most conservative way to look at it is to go to the sources that have always been the experts, correct? The ones that we in the medical community look for direction. That would be the CDC, the WHO, organizations of that caliber. Illinois Department of Public Health, actually, their website has done a pretty good job of giving decent information. But yeah, if you look at the news and the media, it's become very political. It's just very reminiscent of the AIDS epidemic, which was quite different, right? It was a very slowly progressing virus, and it was in very, very limited communities, and the transmission was very isolated because it was mostly sexual and blood. But the political aspects of it are very similar. If you remember back in the 80s and 90s, Reagan's administration was saying there's no problem, there's nothing going on, there's nothing that needs to be done, and
Exactly.
the only way things did get done were when people took to the streets and became very vocal about their needs.
Exactly. Well, could you, and I mean, I got all night, but could you just for our listeners talk a little bit about how viruses work?
Viruses are just one of the many, many, many creatures that live amongst us. The human body is actually has more viral and bacterial cells than it has human cells. So
Wow.
viruses are not anything that we should be afraid of. But there are viruses that from time to time mutate in some ways to cause disease. Viruses basically need host cells to propagate themselves. So they need animal life of some kind or bacterial life of some kind to be able to reproduce. They're basically just genetic material for the most part. They get into the machinery of people like or creatures like us and replicate themselves, and that's their survival mode. In some cases, they're advantageous to us. In some cases, they're very deadly. So they spread in all forms of ways. There's human to human spread, there's animal to human spread, there's zoonotic spread, there's all kinds of ways of interacting with the viral world. But this particular one is a respiratory virus, which in some ways is good because we know how it spreads and it doesn't spread in other ways.
So, what is all this hoopla? How did we go from um, what was it? Sheltering to distancing to mask. No, we had gloves, then we had masks, and it was spray everything that ever comes in your house ever.
No, so you have to look at this as both a scientific process and an epidemiological process as well as a social process. The scientific process is actually it's not brain surgery. It's been worked out. Epidemiologists have been dealing with epidemics for hundreds of years. The classic one we go to is the 1918 flu epidemic, the
Right.
Spanish flu, which didn't start in Spain, but that's where it got reported. So they got tagged with the name of it. But the way we approach an epidemic really started with that. The science kind of got involved at that time in human history, and ever since it's kind of been built on. If you look at the process, the best way I can explain it is if you look at the process that happened in South Korea, sorry, or Singapore, where they really, they have societies that allows them to really come down hard and apply very restrictive laws in a very short period of time.
Right.
They did it the way the textbooks tell you to do it. They isolated the area, they isolated the individuals, they did contact tracing, isolated the contacts, and within very short time, they got their numbers down and they've kept them relatively down. If you look at the charts right now, the countries that probably were the most strict did the best in really containing this, and that's the key. The key in the initial phase is to contain, is to either not allow the virus to enter your community or once it does enter, at the very, 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 very beginning, you contain it and isolate it. If you can't get it at that first phase, it's kind of game over. It's like war. The mentality around it has to be one of kind of warfare decision. So at the present time, it looks like the virus is going to be spreading quite sporadically, which is what I actually thought from the very beginning that it would have. It wouldn't be, in the beginning, if you remember, they were talking about a first wave and then dying down and then a big second wave. And that was literally built on the Spanish flu epidemic. The Spanish flu, it hit in the spring season, killed a lot of people, and then it went away in the summer. And then it came back with a vengeance in the fall, and in combination with influenza, killed probably 2 or 3 times as many as it had killed back in the fall stage.
Is that
And then
because
it went away.
is that
I'm
because
sorry?
is that because it might have contacted or collaborated with the regular flu?
Well, to some extent, yeah, because it would cause comorbidities, right? If you have influenza and then you get a corona or other virus on top of it, yeah, they interact with each other. Yeah, and the Spanish flu never went, it went away after about a year and a half. So they were
You
thinking that
mean
this,
I gotta stay in my house for a year?
well, they were saying that this virus is going to behave the same, but it's not. What this virus is doing is it's kind of contracting and expanding again in other areas. So it's kind of like hotspots all over the place, and that's what we're seeing both in the United States now with the southern states in California and Florida lighting up, whereas New York and Chicago and the tri-state area and the East Coast was the first kind of hotspot. And it's also what's happening in the world. You see, Spain went up and then it went down, and then other countries. So it's each virus has different dynamics. They all have different life cycles. They all have different prolific predilections of how they behave. So this is a new one, and we don't know how it's going to behave.
My goodness. Okay.
You know?
So me as patient, can I invite people over my house?
I think you had asked previous to the interview, how do we open up or can we
Yeah.
open up?
Yeah.
So I think that kind of falls in that category. And opening up is again a part of the epidemiological work. Epidemiologists have worked all this stuff out and given kind of guidelines of how to do it. So if we do it correctly, it can really help keep the numbers down. It's not going to be a 100% solution in whatever case, whether you open up entirely all at once or in stages. Each
Yeah.
is going to have its pros and its cons. But if you open up intelligently, yes, and intelligent means you open up the safest things first, and gradually, if the numbers don't go up, you open up less safe types of activities. So small groups in people's homes, as far as you kind of have a conversation with people that you're inviting to be on the safe side, to see if they've been in contact with any sick people, if they've had any high risk activity, if they're healthcare workers, if they are, have they been tested, things of that nature. And I think in this time and age, it's appropriate. It's literally a life and death type of conversation. So if you want to be happy and around each other, sure, you can get together in small groups. And they say probably keeping it less than 10 individuals at a time right now. Being outside is pretty clear right now that external interactions are safer than internal ones. So if you can do an outside gathering, it's probably a little safer. Keep the hugging and kissing to a minimum for now. It's hard, but it's just a year, so hopefully you'll go away in the next few seasons, and then you can go back to hugging and kissing, and just be smart about
Oh
it.
my God.
Follow all the. I still. I mean, I know that, for example, there are some guidelines that aren't really as important, like the 6 feet rule. If you're walking outside and you pass someone 2 feet away from you, that's not dangerous. It's
Right.
standing in front of someone and interacting with them, talking with them. That can be six
So,
feet.
so, so, what is this thing about leave all your packages on your front porch, spray them, leave them for 2 hours or a day?
So you have to take, again, everything, you have to take it in context. There are high risk activities. The highest risk activity is being exposed to droplets. So the highest risk is kissing someone, coughing on someone, talking loudly, singing, things that can allow the virus to flow out of your airways. After that is probably touching things or coughing, touching, and then someone else touching it immediately and touching their face. That's probably the next most important way. But someone coughing on a countertop, can you catch COVID from that? Maybe. COVID is, it's a coronavirus, so it's in the
Right,
family of the same viruses that cause the common cold.
right,
And we've known for decades that you can catch common cold from touching surfaces and then touching your
right.
orifices, your nose, your mouth, things of eyes, things of that nature. But whether it's a effective way of transmitting it, it's not very effective. So getting a package in the mail, if you want to be extremely cautious because you have someone that's 80 years old living with you, yeah, you can leave it out in the sun for a few hours and that adds some
In order to do
uh,
it.
virucidal type of activity to
Can you? I know I'm pressing you, and you'll get me later. But anyway,
it.
give me, give me an idea. I'm not say I might have coronavirus and I'm asymptomatic. People don't quite
Okay.
understand what that means. Or, well, you got mild symptoms, or you got moderate symptoms. How do I make a clear trajectory of when I need to go to the hospital?
You need to go to the hospital if you have any of the kind of red flag signs. So, shortness of breath, persistent cough that doesn't go away, fever, muscle aches, something called anosmia, which is an altered sense of smell, and that also includes an altered sense of taste. That
Wait a minute.
seems
When
to
you
be
say
when
altered, what do you mean by altered?
your taste is different. If you don't taste
You mean
foods
like
as
metallic, or I
it
don't
could be
taste
any
sweet
change,
anymore?
any change, any change. If you have a perfume and it smells very differently than it usually does, if you
Okay.
eat something, it tastes different. It doesn't have to be metallic; it just has to be different.
Okay.
Um, I don't know if I mentioned fever, but of course,
You
fever.
did.
If any of those symptoms occur, you should not go to the doctor. You should pick up the phone and communicate with them and have them triage you to see what needs to be done.
Okay.
The most dangerous thing in a way about COVID is that many people who are extremely hypoxic or have very low oxygen levels don't feel it for some reason. It's almost as if they're climbing a mountain and have been acclimated to low oxygen levels. So, in some high risk patients, some doctors are advising them to all get pulse oximeters and just kind of monitor themselves. It's a
Can you say
15,
that
$20
word again?
a pulse oximeter.
It's that little device that you can get at Walgreens or
Correct.
CVS and stick your
Buy
finger
it
in.
online. Correct. Correct. But that would be only for very high risk people where things can go south very quickly.
Gee,
Not a
me.
bad idea. It's not a bad idea. Not a bad idea.
I already have one.
It's literally like a small investment in just getting better information. Because a lot of doctors and a lot of patients have described situations where they literally went from feeling maybe a little bit blah to just crashing very suddenly. Or they go to the doctor because they feel a little blah, they check their pulse oximeter and it's in the 80s, which is quite low.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Patient doesn't.
if I have mild symptoms, is it an absence of those four, or is it
Correct.
I can have a summer cold, I can have a summer flu?
Correct. If you feel like you have, even runny nose can be the sole isolated symptom of this disease. So there are individuals that get the virus and they have no symptoms. There are individuals that get the virus and have typical cold symptoms, runny nose, cough, a little sore
Mhm.
throat, and that's it. And then there are patients that get what's called influenza-like illness, which is with the fever, muscle aches,
Right.
severe cough, shortness of breath, things of that nature. And then there are the severe or moderately severe patients that need to be hospitalized and monitored and given oxygen. And then the last category would be the ICU patients.
Okay. So I'm going to tippy toe on down the medical lane here. I
Mhm.
think about the people who have type 2 diabetes, for example.
Right.
What is the relationship? Why does type 2 diabetes become a comorbidity or a concern for
Right.
contacting COVID?
Yeah. So no, what you're talking about is pre-existing conditions.
Yes.
So a pre-existing condition would be anything that any illness that suppresses your immune system or in some way interacts with the viral infection where it can become more severe infection.
Oh,
So individuals with diabetes die more. They get hospitalized more. They get put in the ICU more. Individuals with emphysema, same thing. Individuals with immune suppression from cancer therapy or lymphoma, same
oh,
thing. So anyone whose immune system is weakened by some pre-existing condition or other organ systems are weakened. For example, if someone has chronic hepatitis, they're likely to get sicker. So those are the, your body your body is like a machine and it interacts with the environment in different ways. So if you hit it for two, if it's already malfunctioning a little bit, i.e., from one of these pre-existing conditions, and then you hit it in a car crash, it's going to be more likely to have a devastating result. I mean, that having been said, there's still the mortality rates are not
they're
super
not,
high.
they're not point oh
They
0.04.
are as you get older, of course. Once you get into your 80s and 90s, the case fatality rate can be as high as 30%, which means one out of every three people who have COVID in that age group will die from it. But if you're in your 40s and 50s, the case fatality rate can be as low as 2%. So it's not super high. It's still considered in the medical community, 2% is considered high, especially when you multiply it by a disease that has very high prevalence or incidence. So if you have a 2% death rate in a disease that we see in almost no people, it doesn't matter that much. If you have 2% case fatality in a disease that involves millions of people, yeah,
Right.
then you have a problem.
So, what would you advise people who are not don't have COVID but have these pre-existing conditions? How can they help keep themselves away from COVID?
So, what I tell people is that you have to sit down very calmly and think about a new normal.
Okay.
You have to think through how you live your life, what activities you're involved with, and where you can tweak things to make you safer and also make it safer for those that come in contact with you. So if you're young, healthy, you just need to follow the general recommendations and just be respectful of other people. Keep your distance, do the face mask because all of those things decrease transmission rates.
Right.
Um, if you're older, you need to be a little bit more neurotic. So if you can forego visitors,
The roasters.
you can forego visitors for a while or transition to video visiting,
Yeah.
do that. I've had patients in the office where their child has started having headaches or stomach pains or these kind of psychosomatic type symptoms,
Right.
and you examine them and they're fine, and then you find out, well, they haven't seen their aunt, who's their favorite person in the world, for 2 months. So we started, I talked them into doing video visits and having safe visits, and the headaches and the stomach pains, everything. Yeah.
Well,
So
I
you
think
have to kind of transition, and you have to think
all.
about.
Oh
I'm
no.
sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted.
Yeah, you have to transition. So just kind of sit down for a couple of hours and look at your typical day and see what activities you're involved with,
Mm,
what you do, grocery shopping, work, CTA, things of that nature, and see if you can tweak them for a while to make it safer. Going on public transportation right now, unfortunately, is not the best move.
right.
So if you're older and sicker and you have alternatives, which many don't, but if you have an alternative, make the alternative. I rarely, I'm someone that's very urban and use the public transportation, and I actually find it enjoyable. But now I don't. I just
Yeah.
use my bike.
Yeah. Well, I haven't seen a bike in ages. Let me take you down the road. One of the things that shuttering in place and all this the pandemic revealed was again a society teetering on the edge of falling apart with its underserved, undermanaged, you know, healthcare facility. You had a gazillion health, what do they call them, community centers. You know, that you had nursing homes who can't even cross the street. So how do we make sense? I'm talking to the other side of you now. Take the medical hat off. How do we make sense of what we're seeing? Everybody jumped on, oh, well, we got to get food to the poor people. And we got to, how are they going to get their medicine? Walgreens jumped up in many places and started deliveries before they thought about it. Then after they thought about it, they stopped. But, how did the society undress in the first place during the pandemic?
I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you, but I think you were asking about how we devolved.
Or devolved. Yeah,
Correct.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, that's outside my career field, of course,
No,
but
I'm not. I'm never outside of your wheel house.
you've been my you've been a friend for so long. I have a lot of
I
political
do,
thoughts.
I do, and I'm tapping all of them.
Yeah. I think it was a perfect storm in a way, right? You have the last 3.5 years with the Trump administration, which
Right,
many, especially the young and the colored sectors of society, do not appreciate.
right,
And with the anger building up from that, and then you have everyone being confined to their homes and told not to go out, and then you have these videos come out that show the underbelly of a society that
right,
doesn't function very well with criminal
right,
justice, and
right.
so everyone poured out into the streets. And I'm always an optimist. I think at some point I'm hoping something positive will ultimately come out of this.
Well, I hope that it does, but it's not going away because as people finally pay attention to all the arms of this spider, they see that the injustices, whether it's food deserts, the closings of hospitals, in poor and underserved neighborhoods, all lack of insurance changes,
Yeah,
medical insurance changes. I can't pay
yeah,
my rent.
yeah. With any kind of societal trauma, the weakest and the most underprivileged are going to pay the highest price. So I think what's happened both and with all the three kind of traumas that we're going through, the racial conversation that's finally starting back up again, the coronavirus epidemic that's striking fear into everyone's hearts, and more than fear, I think, is confusion.
Say more about
Humans,
that.
Well, I think the human mind, what it hates the most is uncertainty. And COVID has brought a lot of uncertainty,
Uncertain.
especially it's been managed in our society anyway, where there's just very polarized and conflicting messages being thrown out. So that leads to anxiety, and anxiety leads to bad decision making
Well,
and
what do
all the
we
other.
do with all this anxiety? I mean, you and I can listen to Thelonious Monk and this and that and the other, but what do we do? What do you tell patients? I mean, who have no regimen? They didn't know they were crazy before the coronavirus hit. Now they're saying, "Oh my God, I've become psychosomatic and I'm a hypochondriac and I don't know what to do."
Yeah, the way I approach it, I'm unfortunately eternal optimist, and I always look for the little clue for something positive, even when things are kind of falling apart. The way I would look at it is, any time of stress is a moment where change can happen. So if this is what it took to get someone to realize how bad they feel, then this is the time to reach out and get some help. And there are ways of getting help. There's ways through medical professions, there's online sources.
Right.
The critical thing, as with any psychological kind of trauma that someone is experiencing, the critical thing is kind of acknowledging it. So if someone is anxious and maybe has been for years, but just it's been normalized, which is usually what happens. You've felt that way forever, so for you, that's a normal existence.
Yeah.
But when it gets to a level where it becomes so striking, then that's the time to reach out.
Well, but where are you reaching to? All of the psychiatrists, the other mental health workers are so overburdened that they're losing it.
Yeah, so this is again, I think what COVID did in a lot of ways is it's unmasked a lot of the core problems in the way we conduct ourselves as a society. The lack of psychiatric services to me is criminal, and it really started in the '80s again. There was back in the
Mhm.
'70s and '80s, there was quite a lot of both hospital beds as well as outpatient clinics, free clinics, and little by little by little, they closed the hospitals, they closed the clinics, they defunded the entities. For example, Heartland Alliance in Chicago does an excellent job in um, catering to underprivileged areas of the city, but it's one of the few things that's still standing. Um, the the point that I was trying to make of making something positive out of the negative is that these things are related. Even the police situation, in my opinion, is a lot of it is because you're sending people that are trained for uh, heavy criminal activity to situations that don't require that training. They require psychiatric training.
Or
So
medical.
this
Yeah.
Yeah, so this idea, I think Mayor Lightfoot today put out um, a report of sorts that one of the components of it was to create a 211 line where you call for social type problems. And if that's done, which I don't know if it will be, but if that's something that's done, that would be an excellent solution to this because then we send people to deal with psychiatric problems that are trained in how to do it. And there's training. We do it in the hospitals all the
Right.
time. I learned it as a medical student. How do you deal with patients that are out of control? There's a
Yeah.
mechanism. Yeah.
Now I'm going to turn another corner in your life. And
Mhm.
I don't know how you say happy celebration or what one says. So you have to forgive me for my ignorance at the moment. But I know that July 9th is a very special day in the Baha'i community. It is for the martyrdom of the Bab. Many Chicagoans know that there is a Baha'i Center because it's beautiful and it's right at the lake and it sits there and you can't miss it. And if you go through the gardens and stuff that I've done on occasion and sat down. I'm not a person that meditates because I go to sleep, but I actually sat there for a moment breathing.
Yeah.
And
The Baha'i,
please go.
no, the Baha'i House of Worship is a jewel. I mean,
Awesome. But I think
it's
that one of the things that used to happen during the shutdown and all of this stuff has been that we reconsider our culturalness, but we also reconsider our communities, that we also consider how people have pushed uh, antagonistic stuff where it didn't need to be,
exactly.
and not
Yeah.
digging in and saying, I don't have to become a Baha'i to know you. I mean, I've been hanging out with you almost 30 years.
Well, Baha'i houses of worship are not churches. So, in the writings of the Baha'i faith, they're actually required, but they're required as a gift to the community,
Hmm.
and they're centers of what we hope in the future, once our numbers are higher and we have more administrative capabilities, they become the centers of communities where it's all over the writings as far as the house of worship comes first, and then schools should be built next to it, nursing homes, community centers, service entities, and it is literally described as a gift to the community, to the wider community, not the Baha'i community. It's a gift from the Baha'i community.
Well, let me
So
just say, I don't think our audience understands how the religious impulse works in human society. And some among us, of course not me, but some among us see that what is serving as religion does not or is not meeting the needs of people. And they go out on a limb, like the Bob and some others, and other groups, and they say, wait a minute, there's a better way to do this. Of course, their followers are going to name them this, that, and the other. That's irrelevant. But what, what purpose they serve is there's a better way to do this. There's a better way to understand. There's, you know what I'm saying, all of those things. Then, of course, the larger community is going to try to kick that can down the road as quickly and as murderously as it can. So
well, we
I want our listeners to know that the Bob was in what country?
in Iran,
Right. How long ago?
in the middle of the 19th century, 1840s.
That's 1840s, guys. Okay. Now we have the reason I'm sorry, Dr. Bastani killed
Oh
me.
no.
And the reason he and his family are here is because she and some Sunni Muslims decide, oh my God, this is a heresy. It's like, oh my God, I'm probably a heresy too, but they can't catch it. But you understand what I'm saying? So it is, how do we see the what you were talking about, the impulse of these groups serve the community, not just the Baha'i community. Serve the community. Put a school there. Do this, do that, and the other. Now shut up.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as the persecution, every religion um, is often born out of tumultuous circumstances.
Always,
The Babi and Baha'i religions, if you look at them from a non-Baha'i perspective, from a political perspective, they were um, kind of intellectual revolutions within a very dogmatic system in Iran, which um, had had a very different take on Islam than what my reading of the
always.
Quran tells me. Um, and yeah, it started as a revolution within that culture. But its principles of the unity of religions tells it all. To me, that's the one saving grace. That's saved me from going into politics. In that I found a system that really teaches me that everyone is equal and they all deserve to be respected, no matter what their background or their ideology is. You can still talk.
But I mean, it is awesome. And I think that you and a few others that I know exemplify that by how selfless you do. That I noticed too, because I may just notice your craziness, but I think that it is the selflessness, the understanding of humanity. If you don't see it on the surface, you kind of zero in to go find it, and that it becomes your strategic tool, whether it's medicine or it's teaching, or it's, let's go to the place over there. And I think that that is important, but I really want you to talk about a little bit about how forceful the principles are.
What do you mean by that?
But I know I read it. Ha! Didn't know I did that, did you? How forcible the principles are, and who was available to either meet the Bob or to hear these principles and get some nourishment for their soul.
Um, if I understand you correctly, if you go back to the Bob's time, the first 19 individuals or 18 individuals that actually believed in him called the Letters of the Living. And I think I was talking to you about one of them called Tahira, who was a female. And at that time, she was an incredibly unusual entity in that she was both educated and well versed in the Quran and in poetry and in writing and made.
That's what women do.
Yeah. She's credited with being one of the first, if not the first, kind of major female figures, not just for women's rights, but for religious rights in the Middle East in the 1840s. And she's actually in part responsible for much of the way in which the Baha'i faith is seen as a renewal or a different stage in human religious life. She was the one that kind of pushed the envelope as far as it could go, as far as resisting the old guard in Iran. Um, but I'm not sure if that answered your
It
question.
does. It does. I just wanted in some way to honor a very special day since I'm talking to you and to inform people who are listening about what is, around us. I mean, this is a time, unfortunate, but well, it might not be unfortunate because we're shut up. It might be very fortunate because we get a chance to learn, we get a chance to read, we get a chance, if to reflect however it is you do it. And it's important to see what's behind what you can physically see, like that place up on Sheridan Road. I mean, it's important to know what goes on there. Now I'm going to pivot back to medicine. um what is our I mean, many of us, of course, as patients, do a quarter to a half of what you tell us, but we need a little more, and I think we're getting it.
I'm sorry, I'm not able to hear you very
Okay,
well.
I'm asking, how do we move forward? Can we go out now that it's
Absolutely, like I was mentioning before, if it's done in a phased, intelligent way, absolutely. And the way to do it is, like we talked about, the government needs to open up the safest, needs to tell us and
Right.
guide us. What are the safest activities? Those open first, and then gradually you get to the less safest, as long as the numbers stay down. And you do it in a smart way. I think one of the biggest problems is going to be figuring out what to do about schooling, right?
Yeah.
Because there, the stakes are very different. There, the ramifications of kids not having that socialization in school are quite high, and they lead to very high levels of stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
So that has to be sorted out, and I'm not sure how it's going to be sorted out.
Well, how
But
do what Trump wants to, your president wants to um, send all the foreign students home if they take online courses. We have a ban on people coming here.
right,
Have students who perhaps didn't see all of the potential fields in medicine serving society. I mean, we got a mess.
yeah, well, that's coming from a political angle, and that's not really what I
Yeah,
pay attention to.
don't even go there.
Yeah, it's I mean it's not
Yeah,
sensical.
yeah.
So it's off the plate of things to if someone or something or some way of thinking has led you down the what you feel is the wrong path so many times, you just don't go there anymore. Um,
Yeah. I mean,
but it's silliness. And it's political, it's political gamesmanship, right? He
yeah,
has the ability to tack onto any issue that will push his kind of worldview. So picking on foreign students is going to make a lot of
it
his,
makes a lot.
his
I mean, is that dumb or what?
it
I'm
just
gonna.
makes
We're
no
winding.
relevance.
I know we're winding down, and I would like to give the last few minutes over to you. Our listening audience is everywhere. We live stream. This is Muslim Network TV, and we're striving to do different things. You know, me as the educator, I'm gonna tell everybody about everybody I know, but it's important that people have an opportunity to look stuff up for themselves. But you're the doc, you get the last word.
As far as COVID is concerned,
You can
I
do
would say
COVID, you can do my asthma, you can do hypochondria, you can do anything you choose, but you get the last word.
as, as far as COVID is concerned, my recommendation currently that I'm pushing the most with my patients is um, focusing on anxiety management and information management because this is a critical time. As we open up, we have to do it in a smart way, and everyone is involved in that. So if people make smart decisions,
Anxiety management. How do we do the anxiety management?
anxiety management has a lot of solutions. The easiest is exercise, meditation, things you can do at home. Meditation has been shown in clinical studies to decrease anxiety levels. It's been shown to help with blood pressure management, sugar management, exercise, the same thing. Exercise, if there's one prescription I can give for every disease in the world, except maybe for certain types of disabilities, it would be
Uh,
exercise. Even
yeah,
for those, it's an excellent anxiety management tool. And then if those are not available to you or they don't work out for you, you just have to reach out. For me, it's basically music, meditation, and keeping a positive focus, staying connected with my friends, staying connected with my family as much as I can.
yeah,
Managing the stress is something that just needs to be done and not be overwhelmed by it.
great.
Yeah.
This go ahead.
And I was going to say, managing anxiety is super important because what I always tell people is that if you're highly anxious or highly depressed, you're going to make bad decisions. And bad decisions are the things that
Yes,
come back and haunt.
that is very true. This is
Yeah.
Professor Amina Aldean. I've had a wonderful hour with Dr. Ahmad Bastani, and even though he doesn't like to go there, we've gone down a number of herbal trails, all of which have been supremely informing. And I wish to thank Dr. Bastani after a long day of gracing us with your presence.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
All right. Bye bye.